Hello everybody and welcome to episode 18 of Gamers Without Borders. This is TestZero and with me is Ozzie Arcane and the Achievement Whore, Johnny Chase. How we doing?
Hola. We're doing good. We're 18. We're finally legal in Canada.
Yeah. A couple more and we'll be illegal in the US. You guys enjoy Summer Games Done Quick?
Yeah. I didn't watch it, so I couldn't say.
I had to work for most of it, but I did catch quite a few of the runs there. Pretty impressive, and pretty impressive they were able to raise $250,000 for Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah, that was great. If anybody from the podcast checked them out, thanks for your support for them. I couldn't afford to give them any money, so I just tried to do my best to get the word out there. And today we are going to be talking about female protagonists in video games. We wanted to get an actual female to help us co-host this podcast, but unfortunately all the ones we knew either ducked our calls or just didn't feel comfortable talking about it on a podcast.
Yes.
So, oh well.
Not everybody we know in the reviewer community works well in a group setting.
So, let's start with the very first female protagonist in video games, going back to 1982 with Miss Pac-Man. Most people don't even count her as a female protagonist, I would say.
Well, she has to be. They had a child together.
Yeah, Pac-Man Jr. The big thing about Miss Pac-Man is that if you look at the arcade cabinet for it, they really kind of sexualized her even back then. And you have the ghost kind of like... What do you even say about what the ghosts are trying to do when they're pursuing her? Especially when she's running around wearing nothing but a bow and high heels.
Yeah, I don't remember particularly what the ghosts are doing, but I remember her kind of doing what if it was a human-shaped character would easily be just considered like a flirty sexual pose.
Yeah, she's just kind of
winking.
She's kind of posed like one of those mud flap girls, except round.
Yeah, just looking at the arcade cabinet right now, like the marquee is her on top of the M, just kind of doing that little pose, and off to the right is a ghost, just like. And
then of course they changed one of the ghosts to be female as well. Originally it was like Inky, Pinky, Blinky, and Clyde. Then it's like Inky, Pinky, Blinky, and Sue.
I know that. I didn't know that.
The real reason behind Miss Pac-Man is that it was really just kind of an excuse to make a sequel without having to just call it Pac-Man 2, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I to be fair, I'm not a big fan of Pac-Man in general, but wasn't it basically just the same game repackaged with a different sprite?
Well, it was different than the original Pac-Man. They had new maze designs, and a lot of the cabinets actually had scrolling mazes. So you could actually scroll in multiple directions. And that was actually a fairly revolutionary thing for the time, where you actually had the screen scroll. A lot of games didn't actually have that. Most games were just kind of one screen, and it just moved on to the next screen if you ever reached the end of it.
And one of the major differences, too, is like in Pac-Man, like you would have like the bonus fruit that would just appear underneath the ghost cage. And this one, it actually would kind of like come off screen and bounce around. You actually had to fight for it.
Yeah, you had to actually chase it around. So it was basically Pac-Man, but with some tweaks. I guess that is what Miss Pac-Man is. And the odd thing is, once Pac-Man stopped being around, all we saw was Miss Pac-Man.
It's actually weird, is because the arcades around here, I actually never remember seeing a Miss Pac-Man machine. I only saw Pac-Man machines, but maybe the arcade owners are sexist douchebags around here. I don't know.
I can't imagine anybody being so sexist that they don't even want Miss Pac-Man in their arcade.
I don't know. Maybe they just assumed the boys would be more interested in playing it, but the regular Pac-Man, I don't know. I mean, from what you're telling me, Miss Pac-Man was clearly a superior game, so it is kind of weird that I never saw any Miss Pac-Man machines around here.
And then Pac-Man Jr. was even more superior to that. And I remember the arcade at my at a resort we used to go to. They actually had a Junior Pac-Man machine in the youth section, and that was actually the first time I discovered that Pac-Man Jr. actually existed. I just thought it was Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man. And the interesting thing is, as much hate as the original Pac-Man got for the Atari 2600, Miss Pac-Man for the Atari 2600 is actually pretty damn close to the original.
Didn't know that because I never actually had an Atari.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't have Ms. Pac-Man on the Atari 2600. I had the original Pac-Man, but from everything I've seen now of like people playing it online, it actually looked really close. As close as you can get on the 2600 at least.
Yeah, close you can get on the console. Because the 2600 was not anywhere near as powerful as the arcades.
No.
But moving forward a bit, we move to the most notorious and probably most ongoing female protagonist in all of video games, who got her start out very, very early, Samus Aran from Metroid.
Yes.
When the original revealed itself at the end of Metroid, if you beat it fast enough, and you discover that Samus is a woman, that was a mind-blowing thing for the 80s. Because up until that time, you had people like, you had Princess Peach, you had Pauline from Donkey Kong, and the female was always the damsel in distress. You had Princess Zelda, it was always a princess for some reason. And for the first time, you actually had a female character, and the fact that she was a female was a plot twist, and they made it a plot twist. That you had been playing as a female this whole time, that Samus was a woman. They felt that that was a necessary thing to keep hidden. They felt that that revelation would have been such a shocking revelation at the end, that they didn't just make it obvious at the beginning. In the Japanese promotional material, they used non-gender specific pronouns. And in the American instruction book, since we don't have non-gender specific pronouns, they just said he. And they said that Samus is a robot or an android.
And then it was a twist!
Yeah, it was a twist. But then it just went forward from there, and they really didn't think too much about it. It was actually sort of an afterthought that as they were developing the game, the term Metroid was just a play on Metro and Android, which is like the long lines of areas they go in, which is kind of like a subway station, and then Android, which is the character you play. And as they were developing the game, someone just had the idea, hey, what if at the end we reveal that the character is female? And they're like, hey, that's a pretty good idea. And that was the extent of what they did thinking about it. But then it just evolved from there. Then Samus Aran kind of became sort of the poster child for females in video games. That they can have as many adventures and can be just as powerful as the males.
Yeah. Although I do want to say, I think, I thought the reason the series was called Metroid was because there's actually a monster called Metroid in it.
Well, the term itself is a portmanteau of Metro and Android. But, again, when they were just designing the game, they really didn't know what a Metroid would specifically be yet. And then they just decided to call it those creatures called Metroids, which is always kind of funny, because oddly enough, a lot of the games back then, they weren't named after the protagonists. I mean, you had Super Mario Brothers, yeah, but then you have Legend of Zelda, which Zelda is the princess, but everybody refers to Link as Zelda. It's like, then you have Metroid. It's like, why can't Metroid crawl?
Oh, God. The Wii U owners.
Oh, yes. So, the one that slays me about those is the one that said, did I find a glitch? It's like, you don't fucking find a glitch in a 26-year-old game.
The sad thing is I don't think they realized it was an old game. But I've never personally really been a fan of the Metroid games, but I have always liked Samus. I have always liked Samus, like, even though I didn't really care for the games. I always thought Samus was awesome.
Yeah, well, then, of course, as the series developed, they sort of just kind of played up more that, yeah, Samus is just a very take-charge character. They really started to develop her character in stuff like, they really didn't start doing it until Fusion, but things like Super Metroid really did kind of start tying everything together with a cohesive plot. The whole subplot with the Metroid larva and sparing it at the end of Metroid 2, spoiler alert if you haven't played it yet, but then it just kind of developed from there. A lot of people have a lot of parallels between the Metroid series and the Alien franchise. I
can see that, whereas, like with Metroid 2, the baby... Oh, God, I'm starting with the baby references already. Get to that later. The baby Metroid thinks it's Samus is his mother because it's the first thing he sees after she pretty much wipes out the whole species on their planet.
SR-388, yeah.
Yeah.
Then, of course, you have the parallels with, like, in Alien 4 or Alien Resurrection, where they combine the alien DNA with Ripley, and you get that exact same thing in Metroid Fusion, where she is injected with a vaccine which is called Metroid. You think they could have been more creative with that, but I guess they're scientists, not PR people. And then she ends up getting sort of hybridized between the Metroid DNA and her suit, which led to the Fusion suit, which honestly I've never really liked the look of, but I prefer it vastly to the Zero suit. I think the Zero suit is probably the biggest misstep in the entire Metroid series, because it really kind of marked a turning point for Samus. I mean, she wasn't any longer... because she was in this suit of power armor. Anybody can look badass wearing power armor, really. It doesn't matter if they're male, female, whatever. But then they may put her into this Zero suit, and they just started trying to sexualize her. And she really does not need that.
Yeah, well, at least that's what it felt like from the fact that you can basically see her entire figure with the way the Zero suit looks.
I mean, you can sort of assume that because it's supposed to be skin tight, it's supposed to be very utilitarian. It's just supposed to be just protective because she doesn't need anything bulky, and something bulky wouldn't fit inside the power suit. So I understand the look of it, but the fact that they have her going around in that for a good 30% of the game in Metroid Zero mission was acceptable because I mean it just added to the game. But then they made Zero Suit Samus playable in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and I don't exactly fault them for that because Samus was always a very bulky character. That was just the way she played. But then Zero Suit Samus just kind of changed everything about that. But unfortunately, a lot of the fans started over-sexualizing her in that sense. And they decided, why not keep going with this route? And then we have Other M.
You talk about over-sexualized, who better than the guy who helped create Dead or Alive?
Yes.
Come in and make it a Metroid game.
Though the unfortunate fact is that even though they were involved in it, from what I understand, the series creators still wrote the majority of the script, so it's not as much their fault as we'd like to assume. Yeah. Unfortunately.
The biggest problem, I think, with Other M is that, I mean, with the earlier Metroid games, it didn't really bring to light the fact that Samus was either male or female. It didn't matter. The storyline was just, you're trying to save the universe, or galaxy in whatever case. And the fact that she was female didn't really lead into it. But then Other M, you have constant references to words like mother, the baby, being subservient to male people who are higher ranked than her, and having to be subservient to them simply because they're their commanding officer. But a lot of people take it the other way to say that she has to be subservient to a male, has to be subservient to Adam. I don't think that they managed to present that in such a way that leads people to think that that isn't what they were intending. I think the way they present it is that was what they meant the entire time. They wanted that presentation. They wanted to make it sort of sexist.
And it's another thing where it seems like Nintendo has a huge problem the minute any of their characters open their mouth and talk.
I've noticed that, too.
Yeah, I pretty much guarantee you after Other M, you will never have anyone speak for Link, Zelda, anything beyond any woohoos for Mario ever again. As soon as you start putting full sentences on these characters...
thank you so much for playing my game.
That's as much Mario dialogue as we can have. A full sentence, that's fine.
I always felt if they ever did give Link a voice, I always felt Billy Crudup would have been perfect. He was the voice of Ashitaka in Princess Mononoke.
I have a very vague memory of that anime because I didn't really
He was also Dr. Manhattan.
Well, that I remember.
So
the guy who explodes people with his mind.
He could do much worse to you than with his mind. Yes, moving forward from Metroid, let's not talk about over-sexualization. Let's talk about Tomb Raider.
It's kind of a big jump there, but...
Tomb Raider was another very different kind of character, where the fact that she was a woman was very obvious. That was the entire point of Lara Croft.
Yeah.
She has always, from the beginning, been that kind of woman who is not afraid to use her sexuality as a weapon. And I think that's the difference between Lara Croft and Samus Aran. Samus Aran didn't need to use her sexuality as a weapon. She already had plenty of other weapons. But Lara Croft, she has her guns, but then she has her other assets.
Did she actually do it? Because I thought, from my understanding, the sexuality thing was just, their way of marketing the games, though I'm not quite sure why gamers were so obsessed with triangle tits in the 90s.
It was the kind of people that, it was, of course, slightly before the internet, so you couldn't just kind of Google boobies and get whatever you want.
And if you did, it would take you 20 minutes to get them.
Even then, they were still, I guess, the idea of having Samus kind of jumping around, or not Samus, the idea of having Lara just kind of jumping around was appealing to them. And of course, they had the fucking nude mods. But, I mean, Eidos was very protective of Lara Croft from the beginning. But she was the kind of person, I mean, even when she was portrayed by, like, Angelina Jolie, she always just had that air about her. It's like, yes, she's a female. Yes, she will kick your ass, but she is a female, and she will use that to her advantage if necessary. And I never got that feeling from Samus. She did her job as what she needed to do.
Yeah, well, most of the time Samus is covered in full body armor, so most of the people she's blowing up aren't going to notice that she has boobies.
And, of course, she's usually just dealing with aliens anyway.
Yeah.
And, of course, Lara Croft, she has her own antagonist to deal with. She actually deals with a lot of animals in the early Tomb Raider games.
Yeah, including dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs, for some reason, in the modern day. I always love shooting it with the grenade launcher, and it just kind of collapses into polygons.
Yeah, I could never get into the early ones. I like in the more recent ones prior to the reboot, I could kind of start to see why people found her attractive, but it's like the early ones, I'm like, why? I mean, there's not even any good art of her in the instructions because they just use screenshots of the game footage for it.
And she always had that really weird kind of scowl on her face. But I mean, Lara Croft, she was also a very progressive character for like the whole girl power movement. In the sense that, yes, she was, again, more proof that girls can not only be as good as men, but in many cases better. Because she was doing something that men wouldn't necessarily be able to do. Because the fact that she was female did kind of allow her to have that sort of agility against her opponents. I mean, pretty much every enemy you fight in those games are kind of like lumbering behemoths. And she just kind of jumps between sloped surfaces and kills them with her infinite pistols.
Or the better guns you find that have limited amounts of ammunition.
Yeah, but in that kind of game, you want to save your ammo. So if they can't reach you, use your pistols.
Yeah.
That's weird. Do you think me being the guy with the girlfriend who owns every single Tomb Raider game minus the N-Gage version? We actually had a discussion. It's like, are you sure you have every game? And I did a Google search and it's like, oh wait, you don't have the N-Gage. You don't have the N-Gage version.
And she's like, fuck that version.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I never really latched on to those games, mainly because I didn't have a PlayStation.
That's probably a big reason, because she was really kind of a poster child for the PlayStation at the time when they were really kind of looking for their identity. Then they developed people. They had guys like Crash Bandicoot and then Lara Croft, which really became one of the big selling points, because the PlayStation was marketed to teenage males. They didn't want to play with a fuzzy animal, they wanted to play with a girl.
Although, one thing you gotta keep in mind is Tomb Raider wasn't even PlayStation exclusive. It was also released, the first one at least was released on the Sega Saturn as well.
And I believe on the PC too.
All of them were released on PC, I believe.
But it was a very flagship title for the PlayStation, the Tomb Raider series.
Yeah. Like I said, I can't say a whole lot about them because I haven't played them much. Johnny probably knows more about them than way more about them than I do, considering his girlfriend has like all of them.
Yeah. That was the thing though, is that I haven't played them either. The only one I've actually played to completion was the reboot, the new one. Just because of the fact that it's an origin story, you don't really, they're just retelling everything. She's not that.
Yeah, it's the original Tomb Raider it honestly hasn't aged too well, because it is very clunky, because she has those tank controls where she always moves relative to her own position. So if you press left, she turns left. Press right, she turns right. It's not like Super Mario 64 where you press right and he moves and he runs to the right relative to the camera. And of course that was before you had the twin analog sticks, so actually I had to use the shoulder buttons to turn the camera around.
Yeah, they definitely fixed that in the anniversary edition, where they remade the first game, which is actually kind of funny. Is with the most recent reboot, they've actually rebooted the series twice now, because Tomb Raider Legend was supposed to be a reboot as well, which had a sequel in Tomb Raider Underworld, and now we have the more recent reboot under Square Enix that, instead of having record sales for the series, is considered an underperforming title.
Now that's just exact from Square Enix, but even though they consider it a failure, we are getting a comic follow up.
Well, we are getting a Tomb Raider sequel. It has been confirmed today.
Yeah,
a Tomb Raider sequel has been confirmed.
It's going to be on next gen systems. Yeah. Which I find hilarious because they consider the first one a financial failure, but yet they're releasing the sequel on a system where it's going to cost more money to make it and will have a smaller install base.
Well, it is Square, so it's not like they're hurting for money.
Because logic. But I still have to play the reboot. The reboot interests me far more than the rest of the series, even though I do have the HD trilogy sitting across the room.
So, not counting people like Lara Croft, you did start to see a slight increase in female protagonists in a lot of very, very good games. I think it's strange that a lot of female protagonists in games, the games tend to be a lot better than games with male protagonists.
It's probably because they have to be a little more creative with the storyline, because with a male protagonist, it's easier to just pick some sort of cliche to base your game off of.
Of course, there have been a lot of excellent games with male protagonists as well, but there's so many games with male protagonists. If there's a great game, it's going to happen. But usually, if there is a female protagonist in the game is actually pretty damn good. You look at stuff like Beyond Good and Evil, where you have a character like Jade, and the Beyond Good and Evil is such a great game with a really great setting that, of course, it didn't sell well.
Of course not. It didn't have an all brown landscape with tons and tons of shooting.
No, it had anthropomorphic animals and sailing around in a hovercraft. What's not to love, really?
And I mean, that game definitely has a cult following, because there's a lot of people that are very vocal about wanting a sequel. But of course, Ubisoft keeps going, buy our other game, and then we will make it.
They've teased the sequel. Paige looks really cool in that teaser trailer, but of course we don't know what the hell it is. It was probably just a teaser, of course.
Well, yeah, because they're like, if Beyond Good and Evil HD sells well enough, we'll make the sequel. And then they're like, if Rayman Origins sells well enough, we'll make Beyond Good and Evil 2. It's like, shut the fuck up and make the game. Stop yanking our chain.
It's really kind of funny that a lot of these games didn't have true sequels. If you look at other really unique games that sold pretty damn well, but never got a sequel and everybody's asking for it, kind of the poster child for that is Eternal Darkness.
That's partially because Silicon Knights sucks. But their entire financial situation and everything else stupid they've done is an entirely too big thing to get into in this podcast.
I liked Legacy of Kain.
But the funny thing is, Nintendo just renewed the trademark for Eternal Darkness.
That's good.
So people are assuming it's going to get that the original game's going to at least get re-released on the Wii U eShop.
Possibly. But, I mean, characters like Alex and Jade, they are really sort of interchangeable. I mean, the fact that they are female is really never played up nor ignored in the games. They're just kind of presented middle of the road. I mean, someone like Jade, she is sort of like I believe she runs an orphanage or something, and she does kind of have a mother or sister figure to these children, and she goes out and she ends up having to save the world. I mean, she's a journalist, which is really kind of interesting that you actually play a journalist who saves the world. I don't think I've ever played a game where you have that before.
There is Dead Rising.
True.
He's covered wars, you know.
Yeah, I have not played Dead Rising. I've been meaning to, but it's just one of those games I never got around to.
Well, he doesn't really save the world. He more or less just.
But he kind of got himself into that shit situation, didn't he? through his own universe. It's like, I gotta go in here so I can get some awesome shots.
Yeah, pretty much. He goes there because he knows something's happening and he wants to.
Yeah, but
make
Jade,
money.
she's kind of forced into this situation, and she's just trying to make sure things are safe. And she's just trying to uncover this conspiracy, which I really don't want to spoil in case any of you haven't played it yet. It is a very good game, though, so check it out.
It's on my to-do list, trust me.
And of course,
Same
speaking
here.
of characters that you don't even realize are really kind of female, because they really could have been anything, and of course, another game that was very good, but for some reason never got the sequel it needed, Okami. Amaterasu is female, which really doesn't come into play at all, because it's just a wolf. So it could really be anything. You can't tell one male wolf from a female wolf just by watching how they run around.
Yeah, and considering the developers aren't exactly going to give the wolf genitalia.
Right. Or then they wouldn't have to if it's female, but we're getting into the weird kind of stuff here.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have to model anything.
Although the thing is that's another one that has a bit of a cult following because they had enough fans that they
of course got the Wii release.
Yeah, they got the Wii release. They redid it in HD and released it on the PlayStation Network for the PS3. Amaterasu
They did get a sequel. They got a sequel on the DS.
And Amaterasu also was included in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which actually a lot of people thought was a really weird addition, but
I am all for non-human characters in fighting games. I'm all for that kind of creativity.
But you bringing up games with female protagonists that were pretty fun that aren't getting sequels. You mentioned it before the podcast while we were going through like a list of games. Is Wet is actually a really fun game. It's it's based in a grindhousey style movie style setting with a female character that, while she's not exactly ugly, she isn't really sexualized in spite of how stupid the name is.
Yeah, it really does kind of... It almost seems dirty to have a game called Wet.
The name is supposed to be referring to a phrase that refers to having one's hands wet with blood.
There's a lot of connotations to the word wet.
Yeah,
especially when you have a female protagonist.
Yeah, most people aren't going to assume that when they see the cover of the game, and I think that's one of those things is, she's another character that's a badass that the other characters in the game don't even really address the fact that she's female. They're just, trying to kill you. They don't care that you're a girl.
Yeah, but for every character that isn't overly sexualized, there's about 12 that are. I mean, you look at something like Lollipop Chainsaw, and you know exactly what audience they're trying to pander to with that.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
come on. There's an achievement in the game for looking up her skirt.
Yes.
Well, I think that's actually sort of a joke in the sense that people are going to look up her skirt, so you achievement unlocked is like, ha, we knew you were going to do that. Here, have an achievement for it. Here's an achievement to let everybody know you're a pervert.
Or it could be like the two best friends play.
Is the achievement actually worth points, or is it one of those 0 points?
Yeah, it's worth points. It's worth 10, 15 points.
They should have made it worth 0 points.
Well, here's the funny thing, though. You can't even really get even when you get the achievement, you can't really get a good shot up her skirt, because when you try to angle the camera like that, she actually tugs down on her skirt to cover it up more.
I love that.
That's great.
I love that too. In watching the Let's Play series, Two Best Friends Play, when he got it unlocked, he's like, "Yes, I'm being awarded for my pervertedness."
Well, of course, you have all kinds of other characters like that. You have stuff like Heavenly Sword, Lollipop. I mentioned Lollipop Chainsaw, Bayonetta, Blood Rain. And, of course, most recently, something like Dragon's Crown, which is coming out this week.
Dragon's Crown.
Yeah, you guys just now saw those character designs that everyone was raging about.
If you search Dragon's Crown, what did you search on Google to see them?
I just searched Dragon's Crown characters.
Yeah, search Dragon's Crown characters on Google, and you'll see what we're talking about. These guys look... It's like Rob Liefeld on heroin, or Rob Liefeld on ecstasy. It's even more over-sexualized and objectified than something Rob Liefeld would draw.
It's really like if you fusioned Robert Liefeld with anime, basically.
Oh, God.
Because anime has exaggerated features to it already. That's basically what it's like, except for, as I pointed out,
But the exaggerated features in anime aren't necessarily done for like sexual purposes. I mean, the oversized hair, the oversized eyes, it's just a cultural thing. But Rob Liefeld just drawing the huge muscles on the males and the insane proportions on the females, it's just... I even feel objectified as a male looking at some of the male character designs. It's like, because you made the observation that it's like, females are objectified, men are idealized, but I kind of feel objectified that this is what I'm supposed to want to be. That's what they're saying for a lot of these characters. And I think that's the way women feel about a lot of these female protagonists that do kind of have these overly accentuated proportions. I mean, someone like Julia, she actually looks fairly common, really.
As someone who's actually played Lollipop Chainsaw, though, I will point out one thing. Juliet is clearly depicted as a character that you're not supposed to want to be anything like. She is portrayed very stupid, and like, she's not even, as a guy, she's not even the type of character that you would really want to date, because she's nuts and stupid. And it'd be a long story to explain, but there was one line in the game where her boyfriend was talking to her. She mentioned she had a sensei, and she's like, "Oh, so you mean he's like your teacher?" She's like, "I didn't know you speak Japanese," and she just suddenly starts like rambling off at him in Japanese, and he's like, "I don't understand Japanese, Juliet. I just know that one word." There's tons of stuff like that. She comes across as nuts through most of it.
She actually reminds me of almost a humanized version of Brittany from Daria.
It's one of those things where all the characters are played up in the most insane, exaggerated manner possible. But most other games, yeah, I could see what you're talking about with, like...
and even somebody like Duke Nukem, who does kind of have this almost cartoony sense to him, where he's cocky and he likes the way he looks and he knows he looks good, and he's just this sexualized pig that everybody's supposed to just kind of love, in the fact that he is sort of a satire of this kind of a person.
Although the ironic thing about characters like Duke Nukem is, while the idea is he's the type of character we're supposed to want to be, like, and he's supposed to be viewed as, attractive and stuff like that, average girl will tell you she does not like guys that look like that.
Yeah, I believe what I heard, most girls go for the cuter guys. Like, why? If you look at any of the teen heartthrob magazines, I don't know why any of us would, but they have people like, for example, Justin Bieber, or the people from like One Direction, people like Zac Efron, who just kind of have that look to them.
Or conversely, look at girls that are anime fans, the type of guys they always like. They always like the guys that have like the long hair, pretty boys like Sephiroth, or
the Bishi.
The Bishi, like Sephiroth or Trunks from Dragon Ball Z, or characters like that. They don't like the actual manly looking characters usually.
Well, what do you think about the marketing concept that guys won't play games with female protagonists?
It's an incredibly stupid concept.
Of course it is, but why do you think producers believe this to be true? Why did they almost cancel or not market Remember Me because it has a female character?
Yeah, that had to switch publishers. I can't remember what companies were originally supposed to publish it, but Capcom ended up being the ones to actually publish it. I remember, as I mentioned before we started the podcast, was they had trouble getting a publisher for that because people would tell them that you can't make a game with a female protagonist. Like, obviously this is a different case for an ongoing series that already has a female protagonist, but
trying to launch a new IP.
Part of it is the publishers nowadays are very afraid of anything that they don't see as 100% guarantee. And what are all the most popular games that keep getting sequels? Ones that feel...
Call of Duty, Halo.
And so, like, they're very afraid of that, and it's hilarious because, the sad thing is in some cases it feels like we're going backwards, because we did used to have fairly frequent games that had female protagonists in like the Super Nintendo era. They weren't as common as ones with male protagonists, but they were there. They might not have got sequels, but they were there. And now it's like everyone's afraid to do anything like that. And the other thing that I found was weird with the whole Remember Me thing was, you know, the idea that you can't have a female main character and have her romance a guy because, you know, that's just gay. That's basically what they said.
Yeah, if a guy is playing this and they see their character kissing another guy, it's like, oh my god, stop doing that! I'm not gay. It's like, what the fuck?
And personally, I think that more companies should take EA's stance and not worry about what homophobes think, which is one of the few things EA is doing properly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're actually siding with EA this time?
It's one of the few things that EA has gotten right, is not letting assholes dictate their morals for them.
There have been a lot of games where you can choose to play either a male or female. What do you tend to pick in those situations? Because a lot of people, there's a lot of choices where you can either play the game as you try to live vicariously through your character, in which case most of us would choose a male, or you just try to play out the character's storyline, or you try to do escapism and try to be as far away from yourself as possible, in which case a lot of us would pick a female. I know in stuff like World of Warcraft, I like playing female characters because I don't want to stare at the back of a guy the whole time.
Which sounds horribly sexist considering what we're trying to talk about.
Exactly, but I mean, I like the Night Elves, I like the Draenei, what can I say? I do have a male Tauren though, so...
Well, the way I do things, when it's a game where I make my own character, more often than not, if I'm making a male character, I will try to make them more like myself, so they'll be more like a wizard type character because I'm not physically strong. But on the other hand, if I'm actually making a physically strong character like a warrior, I almost always 100% of the time will make it female, just because I'm already going so far away from what I feel myself to be. Anyhow, might as well have the character be female.
Yeah, well, back to what you were saying, Tess, is that your mentality for making a female character is you didn't want to look at the back of a guy's head for X amount of hours. That was my mentality when I first started playing Mass Effect. I made it female just because I don't want to be looking at a dude's head for the whole time. But I found that the reason I stuck with a female Shepard is just because I felt that Jennifer Hale's performance as Shepard was so much more powerful, much stronger than Mark Muir's. I'm sorry, I'm saying this right now. Mark Muir is boring. Like, playing a male Shepard is so boring. He's so dry in his delivery. Jennifer Hale just nails that, and I will choose a femme Shep over a male Shep any day of the week.
I believe Jennifer Hale was also the voice of Samus in Other M, wasn't she?
No, she was the voice. She did the screams of Samus in the Metroid Prime games whenever he died.
Right.
I don't know who was
Samus
Other M. I don't know who it was in Other M, but definitely. I mean, it could have been Jennifer Hale. She holds the Guinness record of like the most voiceovers in movies, animation, and video games. I mean, she's got like 200 roles. Like, she was just recently Iris in Justice League Flashpoint. We just watched that the other night.
She's definitely got a lot of roles, and she's a very good voice actress for whenever, if you want to have a badass female soldier type character, because she nailed it with Shepard. She nailed it with the Trooper in Old Republic, who basically was just Commander Shepard in Star Wars. But I also used Femme Shep, but you know, I've already talked about that in another podcast, talking about Mass Effect for an hour.
Have you ever been guilty of like avoiding a female character for purely selfish reasons? Like you don't want to play a game because it has like a female character in it?
No. I can't imagine ever even thinking that, because honestly, more often than not, I'll actually prefer games that have female protagonists simply because it's different, because there's so many games that have male protagonists already.
Yeah, it was like I had early at the beginning of the podcast, this observation. A lot of the games with female characters seem to be more original, more creative, I suppose in some ways more progressive than games that have male protagonists. So I guess in the sense that these guys designed this game wanting to be different than everybody else. So one of the things on the checklist is just a female protagonist instead of a male protagonist. And that's just one of the things that comes with it. What about games where you could choose your character at the beginning and they have different abilities whether you choose the male or female? Like stuff like Resident Evil.
Oh, Jill Valentine all the way. The funny thing about Resident Evil 1 is Chris can take more hits than Jill, but Jill is better in every other imaginable way. She has more inventory space. She can pick locks, so she doesn't need to get as many different keys.
Well, Chris's campaign is supposed to be like the hard mode of the game.
Yeah, although in the remake they did change that. You actually have a difficulty setting in addition to picking your character.
Well, I always found that was kind of interesting. It's like, if you play a female, the game is easier. That could almost be going two ways. Is they're saying that she's female, so we'll go easy on you, or she's female, so she's able to do better than a male. Either one of those is like the wrong way of thinking.
That's still debatable in so many ways, because one thing is the difficulty about Resident Evil mainly just affected how many zombies there were in the mansion. If you were doing one of the boss fights, it's always going to be harder as Jill because she can't take as many hits.
Well, when you look at the stuff like the inventory space, you do kind of have to plan your route a lot more with Chris. You have to plan to go back to this place and drop off your symbols or crests just so you'll be able to bring out your weapons and ammo before you take on a boss.
There were also points in the game where you'd need an NPC to help you do something if you were Chris, where you didn't have to with Jill because she knows more shit than him, so she knew how to handle it herself.
Although Barry did kind of have to save her ass a time or two.
The funny thing is the whole Jill sandwich cutscene that everyone knows, where he saves her from the lowering ceiling.
That section is actually completely optional, isn't it?
That is optional, because technically speaking, you can just get the broken shotgun, which is what you have to do with Chris, and that cutscene won't happen. And actually, if you wait too long to go to that room, Barry won't come get you out. Because you're at a different point in the story where he's not around that area. And conversely, there's actually a boss fight he helps you with later in the game, but if you're using Chris, Wesker helps you at that point, so it's really the same either way.
Well, what about games where it's just, where they actually use the female as a character class? Like stuff like Borderlands or Diablo and Diablo 2, where you have characters like the Amazon or the Rogue that are they're just female. I mean, in Diablo 2, or Diablo 3, they allowed you to choose your class and your sex for each character, which...
That actually really bothered me. Because I don't like being able to create my own character and being told that this class has to look this way. It's like, why can't you just be able to pick the gender? Like, I hated that in Diablo 1, that the rogue is automatically female, everything else is automatically male.
Well, If you look at it that way, there really weren't that many big differences between the characters anyway, especially in the first Diablo.
Well, the first Diablo, the fighter is your melee guy, the rogue uses the bow, and the mage uses spells.
But they could still equip still equip anything as long as you have the stats for it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It just matters how they naturally grow their stats throughout the game. The mage tends to get mana faster. The warrior tends to get health faster.
Though, ironically, in those games, I usually still end up picking the female because I usually prefer the way that they play as opposed to the male characters.
I like the rogue just because she starts with a ranged attack, and the ranged attack is just so fucking good in that game.
Well,
early in the game.
in like, say, Borderlands 2, I love using the Necromancer because I like summoning a robot to punch the shit out of my enemies for me.
Yeah. There you go. I played through Borderlands the first time. I played as the Siren, and she was great. And I was playing it in co-op mode, and my friend kept staring at her ass. Whenever I was shopping and he was done, he would just go around and crouch down and just stare at her ass until I was finished.
Yeah, I have to admit I was a bit less mature when I originally played Borderlands, and me and my friends, we were all being idiots and using the sniper scope to zoom in on Lilith's chest.
Yeah, that's probably the one thing I didn't like about Borderlands. I mean, like, I wouldn't mind using Lilith if you could actually pick what those characters were. Like, if I could pick Lilith and I could have Roland's ability to, like, throw down a sentry, that'd be great. I actually didn't like the Siren powers, because for me, they didn't really do anything. I don't know, maybe it's
Siren
because
gets really powerful later on. Once I maxed out some of her Siren abilities, I was able to phase walk and then kill enough enemies in phase walk that it actually reset my timer before my phase walk actually ended.
Lilith is one of those characters where, depending on how you used her ability, would be very situational. Because there was actually the raid boss from, like, the second to last DLC, which the raid boss Craw Merrick's, was virtually unbeatable if you did not have somebody using Lilith in your group. Because he was so powerful, he'd wipe your entire party most of the time. And what you need to do is you need Lilith to go invisible so she won't get killed, so everyone else will have time to get back up there. Because if your whole party gets wiped, his health resets. But another good thing where you pick is fighting games.
Yeah, fighting games. A lot of fighting games kind of play up the fact that there's females in it, particularly the Dead or Alive series.
Not the best example.
Well, yes, but the Dead or Alive series, I will say, the Dead or Alive series has very good and in-depth fighting game mechanics. Yes. It's a totally different series than Dead or Alive Beach Volleyball.
Yeah, the problem is the way they marketed it was the jiggle physics.
Yes, it's all jiggle physics. And of course they have, what's her name, on the cover of DOA 4.
It's like you can have the greatest game in the world, but if you're marketing it to the lowest common denominator, most of the people that probably would have appreciated the deeper mechanics probably aren't going to bother trying it. But yeah, fighting games, though obviously most fighting games, the females are always the speedy character as opposed to the powerhouses or more balanced characters.
Wasn't there a game that came out recently that was like all female characters?
Skullgirls.
No, it was before that. I remember one of them was like a character inside of a big water bubble, and she was actually your big bruiser character.
I'll be honest, I have no idea what you're talking about if it's not Skullgirls.
I want to say it was like Blaze Blue, but I don't know.
I don't think Blaze Blue was all female characters, though.
No, Blaze Blue had male characters. I'm trying to think now off the top of my head, what was it called? Oh, were they sprite-based? Like, were they like
it was like
Mortal Kombat?
It was sprite-based, yeah.
No. Oh, so not sprite-based. Like digital.
No, it was sprite-based. No, I'm not thinking about Strip Fighter.
No.
They were sprite-based. They were like hand-drawn. Ozzie, there was another one you wanted to talk about. We got a little bit more. You wanted to talk about Final Fantasy series.
Yes. I've mentioned this before. I actually liked Final Fantasy 13, although I've realized the main reason I probably liked the game, in spite of how nonsensical most of it was just because I really liked Lightning as a character.
I like Lightning too. She's one of the few characters in that game I actually do kind of like. I don't really even mind Vanille that much.
For as much hatred as I have for that game, I do think Lightning is an alright character, just for the fact that she just punches Snow every chance she gets.
Well, I mean, Lightning was the main reason I wanted to try the Dissidia series, but I just can't get into handhelds. But the fact that I liked Lightning, and that was part of why I actually still like the game. I have 13 too, but haven't played it, partially because I just don't give a shit knowing that Lightning's not a playable character in it, in spite of the fact that it's part of the Lightning Saga. How's it part of the Lightning Saga when she's not fucking playable in it?
Didn't they call it something else?
I don't know.
It's called the Crystallis Saga.
No, that was the Crystallis Nova. I can't remember what it was called, but that was what Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 13 Versus, and Final Fantasy 13 Agato were all supposed to be part of. But every single game in that, except for Final Fantasy 13, has been rebranded as something else at this point. Because Agato was for the PSP and was rebranded as Final Fantasy Type 0, and Final Fantasy 13 Versus is now Final Fantasy 15.
Well, but it's been announced.
Yeah, but now they're not even calling the last game in the trilogy 13-3. They're calling it Final. They're calling it Lightning Returns Final Fantasy 13. And naturally, somebody made a funny Photoshop image of Lightning in GameStop returning a copy of Final Fantasy 13.
Nice.
But they had the wonderful announcement the other day that they've increased Lightning's breasts a cup size and added jiggle physics to the games.
Because that was the feature we needed, right?
All while laughing like a couple of teenage boys, in spite of the fact that they're in their 40s and 50s.
Yes, that was the feature that was missing from Final Fantasy 13. Fuck hallways, we want bigger breasts.
Like, on the bright side, whether or not they jiggle will be completely dependent on what outfit you put her in. So if you don't want them to jiggle, you can just make sure she's wearing armor. But it still bothers me that they took a strong female character like that and felt the need to really play up the fact that her tits jiggle now. It's like, they could have added that and not made a big deal about it.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to... It's almost like those freaking NOV ads that I forget what game it's called now, but it's the same fucking ads. It's like, warning, this game is for adults only. And it just shows this chick there with big breasts holding a sword. And it's like, who the hell are you trying to market to?
Well, I mean, it's as we were just talking about DOA. It's like, when you market your game like that, no one is going to take your game seriously. So I don't know why they thought it was a good idea to be like, yeah, her tits are bigger, and for surefire jiggling, switch her weapon in the menu screen. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
But does it have 6-axis controls to modify the jiggling?
Nothing has 6-axis controls anymore.
What was the game that had that? Wasn't that Bayonetta?
No, that was Ninja Gaiden Sigma.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You had Ayane, is that her name? The purple-haired ninja.
Yeah, I was gonna say Bayonetta for the PS3 was a last-minute port of the 360 version, so I highly doubt they would have implemented 6-axis into it. But it's one of those things where it's like, why? I don't understand. It's like you build her up as such a strong character, and then, hey, titties!
I am in deep fear that they almost did that with Samus. And she seems to be the one character that should not be over-sexualized. I mean, any of these other characters... I mean, if you look at Princess Peach, there is Princess Peach porn out there.
There's
porn for everything.
Yeah, I was going to say, you realize how silly it is saying that when there's My Little Pony porn out there?
Yes, but, I mean... okay. You kind of derailed me with that thought. I mean, Samus is like the one character that they never try to make anything other than the fact that she's just a person. They tried to almost keep her gender neutral in that sense. But, I mean, someone like Princess Peach, she's a princess. She's always getting kidnapped. She just has that air of, this is a female. Not to sound sexist, but that was just her job in these games, was to get kidnapped. Later on, you did get to play as her in Super Princess Peach, which was actually a surprisingly good game. But the fact that she's Princess Peach, she's female, you're going to expect over-sexualization of people like that. But Samus has always been just kind of a character. And then you have a first-person game that they go through 3 different ones. They go through all the Prime series, and she's first-person in every single one of those, and you almost never are aware of the fact that she's female because you play almost the entire game in first-person mode, and it's just there. It's like playing the Borderlands thing. You play a female, but you almost never see them outside in third-person mode anyway, so it doesn't really affect the game mechanics.
True. One thing I will say is I doubt Nintendo would ever openly sexualize Samus, particularly because of their family-friendly image.
Yeah, but they came very dangerously close with Other M, and they're sort of slipping that way. They started sort of slipping that way with Brawl, where, of course, they introduced the Zero suit.
Which is a problem for so many other reasons aside from the sexualization. Because, hey, guess what? If you're no good at using Zero Suit Samus, better not use your Super Smash, otherwise you just gimped yourself.
Yeah, and then, of course, you have Snake hitting on her in his Codex talk, which is just kind of, yeah, they're having fun with it, but it irks me. And I am not the kind of person to get overly sensitive about over-sexualizations. I've made rape jokes before, and people have actually kind of called me out on that. But I'm not the kind of person to be a prude about these things. But I kind of feel offended when Samus is sexualized in that sort of way.
It's one of those things where, I mean, I'm not offended about what they did with Lightning. I'm just more... It's one of those things where I'm just kind of sitting there going, are you guys really throwing away whatever dignity your company has left?
Yeah, that's almost the same way, yeah. It's like they had this dignity and they're quickly losing it. So, Ozzie, where can everybody find you?
They can find me on planetarcane.blogspot.com.
And Gianni?
They can find me on youtube.com/AchievementHorjon, and I also have a 24-hour marathon stream I'm doing on my Twitch channel this Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. You can follow that at twitch.tv/JohnnyLChase.
So everybody be sure to check that out, and you can find me at TestZero.net, and you can find all of us at ReviewersUnknown.com. We will see you folks later.
The baby.
Oh, God.